All right. Always those little things. I still say one of these days we'll have enough money. We'll be able to have an engineer, so I don't have to like, what am I doing here? And all right, everyone, welcome to Accuracy in America. I'm Don Irvine, joined by my longtime co-host Brian McNicoll.
Good morning. Hello, deplorables, drags, despicables, dog faces, and dog-faced pony soldiers.
One of these days you're going to slip and you're going to say dog feces.
or they will.
They're
not far from calling it that.
Yeah, could go either way. All right. Well, we're going to start off on a little bit different note in the sense of just spend a few minutes talking about John Lewis, representative from Georgia, passed away over the weekend, 80 years old. He had revealed, I guess it was back in December, he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, which was pretty much the end stage for him. And I think, he knew that. I think Alex Trebek is somewhere about that point too, right? The Jeopardy host. Mm-hmm. So Lewis passed away. And, we would have our political differences with John Lewis, but he was an icon in the civil rights movement. I don't think either one of us can disagree with that.
Right. Also, when I worked on the Hill, he was untouchable, basically. I mean, no one said anything bad about John Lewis. It was like there was a level of respect accorded to someone who put his life on the line for his beliefs, right, to try to make America a more right, more just place, and literally put himself out there and risked his own life for it. And that you could not overcome. You could not say anything about, right? I mean, it was undisputable what happened. It was all happened on camera, and it was undisputable that he stood there when a lot of people would not have. And I think it was a level of respect for him. There were like war heroes on the Hill, Sam Johnson from Texas and others, but it didn't work kind of the same. He was sort of on a level of his own in terms of respect. And these are guys that's a tough business. It's not for nice people. But they were all deferred to Representative Lewis for that reason, and for good reason, I would think.
Yeah, and someone like that standing up for his beliefs and doing what he did. I mean, you talk about risking his life and all of these kinds of things. It was pretty remarkable. I mean, and then what about, how does he, in today's context, in terms of all the stuff that's been going on around the country after George Floyd and Rayshard Brooks and all the, just a litany of things of how we have a lot of racial unrest. How do you view his life and what his legacy is, going forward even?
Well, I think his legacy as a politician is he was a Democratic politician, right? He fought hard for his stuff. He was not unethical or anything that was ever called on him and so forth. But I mean, he was a typical Democrat. Like you say, there's a lot of stuff you go back through the years that he's done policy-wise that I would not agree with, right? But his legacy is, as a man who, when the moment called for him to stand up for principle, he did. And not a lot of people can claim they did that, right? That there was really a moment of truth in their life, and they made the call that required the most courage. So, he should be remembered positively by Americans, even if you disagreed with him politically, because the contribution he made and what he fought for.
Yeah, this is interesting. So do you think that in just because he did stand up for his beliefs and things like that, do you think that makes him kind of an unusual politician in a sense compared to today? I mean, is he kind of like an old style person who would stand up versus, we have a lot of wishy-washy politicians that don't really.
We've always, I don't know about old versus new, because we've always had a lot of wishy-washy politicians. And generally, the way you get to be a politician is, I always think about, like Bill Clinton used to say, it was, I feel your pain and, all that kind of stuff. So people thought that they heard Bill Clinton saying he would help them with their problem, right? But he didn't really say that. What he said was, that also makes me feel bad, okay? That's different than promising action, right? But, John Lewis didn't mince words. He was a straightforward guy. You knew where he was coming from. You knew what to expect. He lived a life of being straightforward. He was straightforward in a political way that I don't buy, I don't agree to, but he was straightforward. And I think that's an admirable thing. I think it shows that, like, you know, if you think about, like, guys like me and you are discussing this on our show, right? The whole conservatives, you know, Trump sent a message to the family, ordered flags, floated half mast. You know, people on all sides of politics went in and said, well, you know, whether I agreed with him or not, I admire the way he stood for principle. And I think, you know, if you're going into politics, you're going into this kind of life, that's one thing to look at and say, hey, you know, if you want to be remembered in this way, deal straightforward, right? When people disagree with you, they disagree with you. But, you know, deal honorably and straightforward and let that be your legacy.
Yep, I agree with that. All right, we will move on to the great Northwest, Portland, Oregon. 55 days of protest, which have more recently turned much more violent with the looting and all the other things that are going on there. President Trump has sent in federal agents, I guess is what we're calling them. I mean, they're Custom and Border Patrol type of
right,
people.
Under DHS.
Under DHS, they're going in there to try
Someone tried to tell me, you know, it's not their job to protect federal facilities. I'm like, Department of Homeland Security, you know. So, I mean, people misunderstand this. There's a lady on the left is freaking out, who's grabbing body snatchers off the street, this and that. It's like, no, they are looking for certain people. And if you're not that person, you know, there's 8 people standing there and only one of them is that person. They're only going to get that person. They're not going to get all 8 because they don't care about all 8. They just care about the people they have identified as being in charge of planning, bringing in munitions, so forth, to harm federal officers or attack the federal facility there.
Yeah, you know, what's interesting to me too is just that, I mean, this has been going on, as I said, for 55 days. And, you know, no one was really talking about that during the Seattle Chaz Chop stuff. You know, there seemed to be a focus on, if you're going to talk about stuff going on in Northwest, you're talking about Seattle and what was going on there and Mayor Durkin and whatnot. And Portland, you know, which to me is even more left wing than Seattle is, you know, what's going on doing these things. Now Seattle's, you know, not doing as much. I mean, there's still some issues there, but now the focus seems to be on Portland. And, you know, the politicians there, you know, they act the same way that, you know, that Jenny Durkin did in Seattle. It's like, well, you know, we're kind of letting it go, but, you know, they're putting up a big stink about these federal agents coming in to try to restore peace and order in here. I mean, what is going on up there?
Well, for one thing, it's you know, for Trump, it's a great political issue, right? There's one side that says, let mayhem continue. And there's another side that says, you know, we're going to strategically, surgically find the people really starting the problem and remove them from the scene. I think that's the one that's going to get the most votes. I could be wrong. But, you know, Trump has gone up every day in the polls this week. He's now back to 49% on Rasmussen. He was 43 sometime last week. So that's a big move in his favor. Their overall Biden poll, you know, he's now basically pulled even with Biden. They had him like 12 points behind, and now he's basically even. So I think there's a big shift in the country towards saying, you know, one party doesn't seem interested in law and order, and the other party does, right? And, you know, protecting property, which is the real job of government. So I think that what's happening now is, you know, the longer this goes on, you know, I think you'll start to see it as the polling starts showing Democrats that it's not helping them. You'll start seeing them get involved in trying to make it stop.
You know, refresh my memory. Has Biden said anything specifically about Portland or this kind of thing, or the troop, or the, you know, these federal agents going in?
I have not seen a Biden. Yeah. He avoids that. He doesn't. You know, he's in a really good situation for a candidate who's weak with the press and weak in public, so forth, because, you know, he sits in his bunker and he comes out every once in a while and gives a speech. But then he, like yesterday, he ran off stage and said, this is not the time for questions. So, like, when is the time for questions? Even Chris Wallace, you know, who interviewed Trump on Sunday, he's like, Biden should do this. He should be taking tough questions. Like, you know, you may not like Trump's answers, but he sits there and takes it and answers the question, whereas Biden doesn't seem to want that kind of give and take. And I don't blame them, because every time he's been in front of the public, or almost every time, it's been a disaster, right? He calls people names. He challenges people to fights. We laugh about the thing at the first of the show, the dog-faced pony soldiers. But, how did that happen? That was a woman who said, something about being at a caucus. And he said, have you ever been to a caucus? And she said, yeah. He said, no, you haven't. You're a liar. You're a dog-faced pony soldier. It's like, how do you know this woman has not been to a caucus? What tells you that, that you have that in fact, right? You have her name somewhere on the never caucus list, So I don't know. There's a lot of these strange things. He wanted to fight the auto worker, remember? Right. He just called the other guy fat and said, let's do push-ups and all this stuff. The auto worker thing, that got dangerous. Those guys were angry, So I get what they're saying. And, he still hasn't and won't answer questions about Tara Reid. He's got all his papers hidden in University of Delaware. It's like, if, you're talking about Trump and his tax returns, Mueller saw Trump's tax returns, went over them with a team of forensic accountants, right? Looking for anything they could get on Trump about taxes. So the fact that Trump hasn't shown his tax return doesn't really matter, because prosecutors who had it in for him were looking for anything they could possibly think up to prosecute him for, have gone through them and found nothing there. But we have all these papers, public papers of Biden's Senate records that are in the University of Delaware library, and for some reason they're sealed off, and he won't allow anyone to access them.
So this makes me think, though. Particularly with this whole Portland situation and these federal agents, which seems to have most of the liberals, the lefties, up in arms about this.
Absolutely nuts.
Right. So, where's the media on this? Why are they not trying to find a way to press Biden and try to get the Biden campaign to give them an answer on this thing? To me, this is just a real dereliction of duty, But then again, I think we know, if they can give Biden a pass, they're going to give it to him.
Right.
But this is a terrible thing. I think that the media is doing here is not forcing Biden's hand on this,
and also not correcting some pretty obvious errors. One thing, these are not random arrests. That's why you saw the moms who've all joined arms to protect buddy, you're not where they're going to be, right? They know who they're looking for. They know where to find them, and you won't be there locking arms and protecting them. Also, Andy says that, I don't know, I know you probably keep up with him, a guy who covers this movement from the inside. They're shooting video and reporting on it every day. Says that, a lot of these moms were, last week they were wearing black bloc, and they were in with the protesters and beating, starting trouble, breaking stuff. And right, their status as moms is in question. So, they're targeting certain people. They have certain names they're looking for. It's not random. They have the authority to do it. They're using Border Patrol, people who are part of the Department of Homeland Security. It is the mission of Homeland Security to protect all federal installations. This is not something people are just making up and, a random run on American civil rights, right? And peaceful protesters are being allowed to peacefully protest every single day in Portland.
And that if this had been a right-wing protest, not a right, conservatives never would do anything quite to this extent. Right. But if they had been that, and these people had come out and they said, we're moms, and they formed this wall and stuff like that, to me, the media would be evaluating and investigating and trying to figure out who all these people are and saying, are they really moms? And saying, look, they said they were moms and they weren't. But if it's on the other side, it's like, okay, we'll take their word for it.
Yeah, they're moms.
They're moms, okay?
Can't go against moms.
No, we can't. Oh, we can't. That's we can't touch the moms. But it's always, if it's the left wing, going on and saying these things, They can call themselves, virtually anything they want to, and the media just says, "Oh yeah, fine, that's great," and they actually play them up and puff them up. But when conservatives do that, I mean, it's like they want to do a background investigation, like an FBI check or something like that, on
Right.
people, to verify who they are. The other thing about this too is that Trump has made, he said he wants to. I don't know. I guess I should ask you this. I mean, did he say he was going to send agents into Chicago, or he was planning on it? I know Mayor Lightfoot has been like, Lori Lightfoot's like, she doesn't want anything to do with this. That's what she called them, Trump's police force or whatever, and stuff it is. But crime is soaring. Homicides are up 50% in the last year.
Right. But that's not. You can't go for that. That's not what they're going to do. They're going to protect federal property. Right. The crime in Chicago is still Lori Lightfoot's job to deal with, or attempt to deal with, or whatever it is she calls herself doing. But she can't keep them out. These guys, they don't need invitations. They don't need to be welcomed by the local mayor, right? They're free to do what they. And you think about it, that's what you want that to be too. So did you not want federals to have the power to overrule locals in Little Rock, right? Back in the 60s when we were integrating schools, where were you on that issue? You were fine with the federals overpowering Little Rock then because, it was doing the right thing, okay? This is protecting federal property. It's doing the right thing. The federal government is doing only its business, right? It's not messing with local affairs.
Yeah, I mean, Lori Lightfoot has obviously lost control of what's going on in Chicago. There's nothing wrong in my mind with the president saying, look, we're concerned about what this may mean for federal property. So we're going to go in there and we want to protect that before it gets any worse. I mean, for heaven's sakes, there were 14 people shot on a drive-by at a funeral.
And then the people started shooting back.
Yeah, I mean, what's this? It's like
in a city where no handguns are allowed.
Yeah, I'm never moving to Chicago. It's insane. But I mean, and I've said before, the summertime tends to, you have tempers flare a lot more. We've got with COVID and all the restrictions that have happened overall, that probably makes tempers flare even more. But it's still something that can't, the mayor has got to do something about this, and she has done nothing to control this at all.
In fact, she's worked against it, right? The police are demoralized. She takes the criminals act against the police. She discourages people from going to church, doing things where they can, you can promote good in the community. She's got only herself to blame for a lot of what's gone wrong in Chicago. Also, Chicago, unions have an iron grip on that city, and they serve their interests, not the interests of the people. And they want to live like that. You can do it, but at some point, somebody needs to run for office there and say, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to try something else.
Do you think that it would have been any better had Rahm stuck around, or had Rahm just really already?
I think Rahm is a much better public servant than Lori Lightfoot. Yeah, I don't know how much better, but I would, if I was a Chicagoan, I would rather it still be Rahm.
Yeah, I mean, given everything, not that I'm a fan of Rahm, it's just that it just seemed that things were better. At least the morale, and just
more orderly.
Yeah, you just felt that way when Rahm was around. But after Lori Lightfoot has taken over, this thing has already gone to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah, it's just it's pandemonium. Completely out of control. Same with Portland. The mayor. I mean, he mouths the platitudes, but I mean, he's basically saying he can't control what goes on anyway. So, why are we paying him? Why are we, you say, okay, if they can't control anything, why is there a local police department? I think in the case of Portland, the police themselves have tried to work really hard to stay in the right corner, but their hands are tied. They have a mayor who works directly and publicly against their interests. The same in Chicago.
Yeah, that's a problem. Moving on. So President Trump has now restarted the coronavirus daily briefings. The president seems to have modified his viewpoint, at least in terms of, he's He's been seen wearing a mask. I think he tweeted out, "Masks are patriotic." And then, he said that, it's going to get worse before it gets better. So that seems to be, different than what he was saying before. The summer certainly did not turn out like a lot of us had hoped for in terms of tamping down, the whole coronavirus issue. But I think it was the Wall Street Journal this morning was reporting about, the overall, the people who have died from this. It's been somewhere between, 0.5% to 1.5% of all those who have contracted COVID-19 have actually died from this. Higher than the flu, but it just doesn't seem that it's certainly something that becomes this huge problem of like, we have to worry about it so much that, we go into this panic mode that we have been set forth into. Once, both you and I, we don't want anybody dying from these kinds of things, but this virus is out here. We have, vaccine, in place, or at least, being developed, and shots and whatnot. They're working at trying to mitigate this, but it's not going to go to zero. I keep saying it's not going to go to zero. So we're going to have to live with something.
Right. And, we need to pick our poison, basically.
Right. Right.
But I mean, if you take out the first 2 months, the possibility of dying after the first 2 months, we developed some therapeutics. By the way, who was in front on which therapeutic would work, right? Trump or the scientist that Biden's always saying he would listen to, right? Trump, right? The doctors were telling him, hey, we use hydroxychloroquine and the Zeke pack and so forth, and we're getting huge results, right? And they're like, oh no, he didn't go through the process, this and that, and the other. And Trump's like, yeah, but it works, so use it, and we'll backfill the data later. He's right that it needs to be researched, and we need to find out how it works, why it doesn't quite work on every single person, because it does seem like about 4 or 5% of the people who contract coronavirus, the hydroxychloroquine and the zinc and the Z-Pack don't work. That regimen doesn't work. So what's different about those people or about the virus that they caught, right? So there's a lot of backfill. There's a lot of science that needs to be done, worked on for this. But, we settled on a cure that was really inexpensive. And, it's all drugs that are, well out of patent and so forth, and that we could obtain cheaply. The first 29 million doses were donated. We've gone through all the donated ones. And, now when you get it, even if you get a fairly severe case, they can treat it. They get you back on your feet pretty quickly. Early, we were sending all the sick people to the nursing homes, and we were making a lot of really catastrophic decisions that resulted in a lot of deaths in New York and New Jersey, right? New York and New Jersey are still more than 40% of all the deaths, right? The rest of the states make up only 60% of all the deaths, right? In the United States now, you're having about 300 people a day die of this, and it's not really spiking, right? The people say it's spiking, but they can't find the records. The other problem we have is that it appears the record keeping on this was done with politics in mind. That is why Dr. Birx insisted on taking it out of the hands of the CDC and having the stuff reported in real time straight to the White House, because they could see that political activists at the CDC were manipulating the data to make the threat look bigger than it is.
So do you think that that Trump's statements, his attitude now are in part because of how things are going politically? I mean, the Trump administration has been bashed over the head by the liberals and liberal media for the handling of the response to coronavirus. Do you think this is having an effect on why President Trump, went ahead and has restarted these briefings and is talking about masks and saying it was going to get worse before it gets better?
I think that he is I think that they realize that part of the problem in Tulsa is that people are legitimately scared of catching it. And, so he's saying, if he's going to have rallies, he's now announced, a new series of rallies coming up that it's going to require you to wear a mask if you can't social distance, right? So he wants the people to feel comfortable. He is in some ways talking to his supporters saying, hey, hostility to mask is not helping us get to the end of the road here. And so maybe if we're less hostile, the other people will leave us alone sooner about this, right? The efficacy, I still have not seen, and I wish somebody would tune into this and see and send me, the efficacy of masks. Is there anything that proves that, if you wear a mask, it reduces the risk, right? I've seen the figures I've seen, because I've looked for this, is there are people who say 0.9 to 2% risk is reduced by wearing a mask, right? Your risk is reduced by 0.9 to 2%, which, is that a lot in this field or not? I don't know. Sometimes, 0.9 is a huge number, or 2% is a huge number, and sometimes it's not, right? So I don't know about that. You read these things about the masks, they're, especially the cloth mask, are not, the threads are too loose to catch the virus and so forth. The virus is like a third of the size of the most well-made mask. So, it doesn't really stop it from getting through and so forth. But, he says to wear them, that will get a lot of people to quit being hostile to them and to feel safe at rallies and public gatherings. Okay. If we're going to all wear masks though, then we should be able to have some public gatherings. Okay. There's a lot of photos out there of, one of the things that got me on this was the 1918 epidemic baseball games. Everybody's at the game. They're all sitting together, but they're all wearing masks. Okay. So if the masks work, if they make that much difference, then why can't we do some of these other things?
Yeah. I mean, how do you think, this plays into too? Because I mean, we get these stories every few days about the Republican National Convention. They move the convention from, North Carolina, from Charlotte down to Jacksonville because of Governor Cooper wasn't, he wasn't really going to allow them big gatherings and whatnot. But then, things have, spiked up in Florida. I mean, worried some people in Florida. So now they're talking about maybe a mixture of indoor and outdoor things. I mean, there's no doubt that the convention itself will be scaled back dramatically. Do you think at this point they're going to have many attendees there at all, whether or not it's indoor or outdoor at this point in time?
Well, I mean, it's still it's like early September now that they're talking about doing it, right?
They're going to September. Okay, yeah, I don't know. It was August. It could be September. I don't know anymore.
Hey, Jacksonville is hot.
It's hot.
I mean, we travel around the country watching baseball, and the hottest game we've gone to in the last 5 years was in Jacksonville. I mean, I felt diminished when it was over. There was less of me there, which I guess is good in some ways. But yeah, I think that the whole idea is they don't want this. The Democrats are doing everything they can to stop there being this big celebration of all things Trump, right? And not have that optic on TV of, the party rallying around him and, the people speaking on his behalf and so forth. They want to limit that or keep it out. I think that's a big part of I know that's a big part of what happened in North Carolina. That was just straight subterfuge. I don't think it's justified by the statistics, by the public health. The cases are going up, but now we're finding out, especially in Florida, they have all these places where, they were reporting everybody who took the test was positive, and then it's not quite right. It was 4%. It was 6%. Okay. So when you get down to the truth of what the numbers are, I don't think it's going to justify all this panic.
Yeah. It's interesting too for me because we have our local central committee is doing a couple of fundraisers. I mean, you can imagine, the traditional fundraisers that, Republican parties, any political party, anybody really, the nonprofits as well, have been really wiped off the calendar. So, they've taken a different tack, which actually is kind of interesting. They're going to do an outdoor event. They're going to do 2 backyard kind of parties. One at the new chairman's house, who just got elected last night, and another one at one of the other central committee members' homes. And limit is 50 people. They will have to be socially distanced. It's outdoors in the backyard, and some people have to wear masks. Now, it's only $25, but I'm thinking I am not going to, in July, August, I am not going to sit in the backyard of someone's house having to wear a mask and be socially distanced for an outdoor event. This doesn't. But I think they're forced to do this so they don't get called out by the liberals and the Mark Elrich, just the government and any liberal news media people are saying, oh look, the Republicans held an event and they didn't socially distance or
don't care about death.
Yeah, right. They're gonna they risk all these people. So but they limited to 50 people. They've got, I think, 49 people signed up for the first one, so that's great. We've now had a communication from our church about coming back to church, and they're still doing the go slow approach. It looks like we won't be back in until sometime like the third week of August, with a limitation as to how many people can be there, and everybody will have to wear a mask. It'll be only for 30-35 minutes. And don't really know how many people are going to show up at that point in time. We've got some elderly people, we've got some young family. I have a guy who's from Canada. He is a staunch anti-mask guy. I mean, I love him to death. He if he could be, if he could vote here in the US, he'd vote conservative Republican all the way. But he just sees this as an infringement upon himself. So I'm thinking, like, okay, he's got like 5 kids or whatever. It's like, I don't know that he would. I'm not sure. As staunch, faithful, churchgoer as he is, I don't know if the mask requirement, makes him wonder whether or not he wants to actually sit in church until they finally lift that.
Okay, so where we are in Catholic Church is that in the United States, you're still dispensed from the Sunday obligation. So, it's a mortal sin if you don't go to church on Sunday. But you're dispensed from that now. You don't have to do it. But churches are reopening. Almost all of them now are reopened, at least in Virginia and on the East Coast, from what I can tell. But like every other row is left blank. We have ushers who seat you. They've limited the people on the altar. There's now 1 lector instead of 2. There's no altar servers. The priest handles all that themselves, and they come in from a side door and back out the side door. They've altered like how you get communion, so you don't bump into anybody, and you don't touch the aisles and the seats. I mean the pews and so forth. And they deep clean the church after every mass, so they make you with mass ends. I don't know, most churches, when church ends, like everybody stands up and says hi, and that's a period of visiting. It's a very important period in the life of a church, right? That's when we join and honor the community, right? But there's like, you want to do that, you go outside. You can't do that inside. Have to wear a mask all the time you're inside. That's one thing I don't understand about all this is, why do you have to wear a mask outside? Right? I don't think that anybody can prove the efficacy of that. If you're at a baseball game or you're close in, you can't socially distance. Okay, I get it, I guess, but I don't understand why, if I'm just walking down the street outside, I need to wear a mask.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that in my neighborhood, on a Sunday when I get up early in the morning and do a walk around the neighborhood, for those that are regular walkers that we encounter along the way during the course, is that the people that initially wore masks outside no longer do so. I think they realize, like, why am I doing this? Right. They're still. I mean, how many times are you in a car and you see somebody drive by and they're wearing a mask in their car, and I'm like, why? I mean, especially if you're alone, right?
Yeah. What are you doing? What are you preventing?
I don't understand this at all. I mean, it's just a lot of head scratching things that are going on there. But you bring up an important point in terms of honoring the community, or we are social people, particularly church. So the social aspect of church is very, very important. I mean, we are there for a religious purpose, but we are also there for a social purpose. And when we're told that basically don't shake hands and don't do this stuff, this is a sea change for us to,
right.
I
don't know if in the Catholic Church, there's a moment in the Mass where they say, now let us offer each other a sign of peace. You basically shake hands or And that has been cut out of the Mass. In fact, we were at Mass last Sunday. The priest started to say it and then just stopped himself and smiled, and everybody kind of smiled like, yeah, we don't do that anymore. It's been cut out, and I don't know if it'll ever come back.
But
Also,
right.
the people who serve, some Mass, some churches serve wine
Right.
with the host, but that's out, and I doubt it's coming back.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just I'll be very curious because to see exactly how this is going to operate and for how long it is that whether or not some of the things that we were used to in our respective religions, churches, will ever come back. It's and this is the way a lot of our lives are, our daily lives, is that
Yeah.
there are things that probably will never come back, unfortunately, because of all of this. All right, we have to continue moving along. I do want, here's another thing which I think you will have probably plenty of comments on. So we have more releases of documents, Peter Strzok's notes and things like that. Does this not just really kind of lay bare that there was no collusion, that this was a political,
Right.
maneuver here?
It becomes more apparent with each release that they kept. I think this. We've talked about this before. I think the whole reason that Bill Barr was brought in as Attorney General was to end the Mueller probe, because it looked like it had long since become a fishing expedition. They realized they didn't have anything. They were just going to keep investigating until they could hopefully find something, right? And then they ended up not finding anything. And I think Barr came in and said, where are we? What are you pursuing? If I let you go, this goes on 6 more months. What will you be able to accomplish that you haven't accomplished already? And, they didn't have a good answer for that. So he's like, okay, write your report, and I think that's how we got where we are. It was, it's funny though, somebody put together a good compendium of what all the media said about this at the time, which was they were just absolutely sure that Trump had done all these things and that he was guilty as sin. And, it was, the walls were closing in, we were laughing about the amount of times that's in there. But the fact is they knew, Strzok knew, the actual agents working on this knew that there was nothing to it, that it was a dry well. It wasn't going to hit anything. And they continue to pursue it. They write a report then that says, we didn't find anything. We're just short of the threshold of proof on all this stuff, when in fact you had no proof. Okay. So, John Durham is at the behest of Attorney General Barr has been investigating this for 2 years now. Right. So it's a crime that took place in late 2016, early 2017. It's been investigated since early 2019 that we know of, and probably before that. But we have nothing. We have no indictments. We have no letters. We have no prosecutory decisions at all, right? All he has said is that it probably won't implicate Obama or Biden. Okay. The other thing is, we're not talking about is that, Biden did lie about Ukraine. He apparently did get the prosecutor over there fired so that in the investigation of how his son came to work for Burisma. Okay. Just as Trump said, guilty as sin. No one talks about that at all. Right. He's been named a criminal suspect in that case. He returned, if he ever went to Ukraine, he would be subject to arrest and criminal prosecution. But as for this, they had no evidence. We have this long running investigation into how all this happened. Every once in a while, they, Barr or Newt Gingrich or whoever says, these are terrible things, and this is going to be some kind of whiz-bang prosecution because, these are terrible crimes and they got to be addressed. It's deeply troubling, and we see nothing. And, if you wait much longer, you're not going to be able to do it, right? We are running out of time to see those indictments. It's July 22nd. If we're sitting here, we get to Labor Day and you haven't seen some kind of breaks in this case, then you can't really use this, right? Because it'll be seen as politically motivated. You're just attacking these guys right before the election to turn the vote for Trump, right? So time is of the essence. And I don't know, they've expanded it and expanded it. And it's like last week they hired another U.S. attorney to work on aspects of it. It's like, don't add to the case. Bring what you have in, right? Perp walk some people, okay? It's to show, show what's going on. It's to show the American people get a clear vision of what's going on here, right? Because right now it's basically, our word against theirs and the media amplifying theirs. So, I think it's time for there to be some actual enforcement done.
One of the things that I thought was rather amusing, because when I was watching the captions on Fox News this morning when I was at the gym, was Strzok's attorney was like, well, he says, this is shame, something to the effect of, this is a shame, for what they're doing to Pete's good work on this. But there were things in there. They're talking about the New York Times article, which hyped all this stuff up, that Strzok had been writing in the margins about, like, he says, we have seen no evidence of this, that type of thing, right? So it's like, wait, Strzok's good work? I don't.
Well, their line, and Lisa Page has said this, and others involved in this have said this. It's very consistent. They're like, we did a lawful, ethical investigation, and we didn't find anything. Okay, were we frustrated we didn't find anything? Yeah, we expected to find something. Okay, but we did our jobs as we're supposed to do it. And that may be true. I suspect that they did their jobs with some prejudice that ought to be looked at. But for their sake too. Like, what do you have, Mr. Durham? Who's telling the truth here? What do you know of this? What happened here? Because right now it's like, oh, just wait patient. And it's like running out of patience, right? If they're, it's getting to look like the Miller probe, right? If you have something, bring it in. If you don't have something, then end the probe. Yeah,
no, I agree with that. All right. So let's talk economics and stimulus and things like that. So the Republicans, the Senate has been there. They've been negotiating, trying to figure out whether or not they about $1 trillion stimulus package, but not all the Republicans are on board with this. They don't want, they think $1 trillion is excessive, and they're looking at the price tag and things like this. But I don't know. I am a fiscal conservative. I don't like the idea that we're tacking onto our debt. On the other hand, to me, there is a reality, in our lives that, without the things that have been stimulus packages that have passed so far, and all the things, that we would be in far worse shape economically. And, all the money that the government's poured into the economy has helped keep it afloat at a very critical time. And we do have this, with this kind of if you want to call it a second wave or just a spiking of COVID cases and whatnot, as we've seen, some of the states put a pause on things. Restaurants that were open or bars that were open have shut down. So there may be more people filing for unemployment coming up in the very near future, and we have the $600 bonus payment basically to the unemployment that's ending this month. And a matter of fact, while it ends officially on the 31st. It'll end a little bit earlier for some people. It depends on when the states actually end their month. And some of them end at 4 or 5 days earlier and things like that. So, the 25th, 26th could be the end for a lot of people with their last, kind of inflated unemployment check. And then what do they do there? Also, the moratorium on evictions is about to expire. Okay. So you have a lot of things that are about to come into play here. And I don't know whether or not the economy can survive, all of these things expiring at once without trying to pump some more money back in there. I know there's discussion about maybe, doing something, extending, the unemployment thing, not necessarily to the $600. I was thinking about this yesterday, thinking like, can we do kind of a gradual decline? Can we go to say 500 or 400 or whatever for a little bit of period, and to wean ourselves off of this, so that also it doesn't give people the incentive to stay in unemployment rather than work. I did talk to a friend of mine who said his son was making more money on unemployment than he would have had he returned to work. But when the job that he was working at said, we'd like to bring you back, he wanted to go to work. He didn't want to sit at home. It was costing him money to go to work, but he'd rather be at work. So I mean, that's a lot. There's a lot there, but I mean, what's your feeling about what we're going
I
here?
think there's a concern that whatever financial aid is supplied does not make it more profitable to sit home than to go to work. I think that there's, people on both sides of the aisle in Congress saw a problem there. People offered their jobs back that didn't want to go because they were making more money sitting home doing nothing. And I think people understand that that's, the AOCs in the world made a case that, what's wrong with the bottom end guy getting a little extra for once? It's like, well, that's fine, and if you're going to do it, this is the time. It's the other thing about it, yeah, I'm a conservative too. But the reason that we battle over the budget every year and we try to cut out every wasteful thing that we can find is so when stuff like this happens, we can throw some cash at the problem. This is the emergency we're conserving for, right? This is why we conserve. Okay. I've never seen anything in my life. We were talking about this with my kids the other day. Like, you'll be my age and way past my age and 30, 40 years past my age, and you will still be remembering the summer of 2020, right? I mean, it's unlike anything you've ever seen, I've ever seen, right? These are extraordinary times, and they call for some extraordinary measures. So yeah, you're going to get some more cash pumped into the system. One of the big things Leader McConnell wants to push for is liability reform. So if I open my store and you come in my store and you get COVID 5 days later, you can't sue me as the vector of the COVID, right? It's going to be just a general liability law. The treatments, most of the treatment is free, right? Or can be had for free if you need it to be anyway. So, it kind of doesn't make sense to hold people criminally liable or civilly liable, I'm sorry, for it. So, I think one of the things that will come out of this is a liability reform plank, right? That sort of like makes it where businesses can do that, which we've talked before. That's kind of a necessary step to take. But I think there will be another direct cash payment in this one. And that's what's really driving up the cost. If you don't have a job and, you're now, 4, 5, 6 months into not being able to make any money, then yeah, a cash payment's probably a good thing. And, I don't think I hold it against them or I'm going to worry too much about that. But I think we need to start incentivizing return to work. I also would not object if they continued the ban on foreclosures and on evictions, right? But it's got to be both, right? Because if you own property and you're renting it out and you're not getting your rent, then it's hard for you to pay your mortgage, your note, right? If your source of income to pay that note can't pay you. So, if you want that property, if you want those people to continue to be able to live where they're living without the means to pay the rent, then you're going to have to help the landlord too.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, and it's an important point about the protection for liability protection, because we still will live in a litigious society, and it doesn't take anybody anything to go at the drop of a hat to go sue for whatever.
Right. So, and there's a lot of money on the sideline right now that would come in if there wasn't a big worry about liability reform, about liability.
All right. 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Boy, there's so much stuff up here. I do want the schools situation. We didn't get to that. Schools, I guess we're going all virtual here in Fairfax for the first quarter, and they're going to look at it after that. Montgomery, where you are, is there going to be at least through the first semester, no sports.
Right.
Fall or winter. Montgomery has said no sports, fall or winter. Even down in Texas, where football is king, they have said the smaller high schools can start fall sports on time. But the larger high schools, the high schools in the cities and so forth, they won't play a football game till like September 24th. And in Texas, there's so many rounds of playoffs because there's so many schools and so forth, that now the playoffs won't end till after Christmas. There'll be January high school football. There's talk around here of moving the fall sports into the spring, and playing a condensed winter schedule, then having the fall sports and then the spring sports. and running, the playoffs all the way out to the end of the year. That would get them all in, right, and would help the spring athletes get looked at by colleges and so forth. But one big problem is when you get to the end of the year and you're dependent on seniors, right, you don't really have any leverage over them. You get to a point where, if they decide not to show up or to show up drunk or whatever, you can't really suspend them, right? They don't have any more school left. They're done. So, there's issues like that they're going to have to be worked through. But it's unclear what happened in Fairfax. Why we were on schedule. They had asked parents, and Loudon was the same way. What is your preference? 5 days at home, or 2 days in the classroom and 3 days at home? And in both counties, 2 days at school won convincingly. And then both counties reversed in the last day or so. And both superintendents have asked their school boards to approve no in-classroom instruction. A teacher told me last night that when Fairfax said, which teachers are willing to come teach in this, they didn't get enough to fill the classrooms. So I'm like, hey, hire more teachers. You can be replaced. And so what if one dies? I'm like, there's something like 13,000 teachers in Fairfax County. It's not impossible that one's going to die of something somewhere along the line this year anyway, right? Out of 13,000 people in some school somewhere, you're going to have a teacher who dies. I mean, that wouldn't even be considered unusual, right? So I don't know. I think they're fraidy cats, and I think it's got to have a big impact on the election because you don't have all these college kids on campus, right? But I think we need to get back to school. I think that missing school during the warm months, not going back August, September, and putting those students in there during the warm months is going to end up being one of the big mistakes that got made in all of this.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm glad I don't have any more kids in the school system. But yeah, this is a good study, a case study about how the parents, and they want to see their kids back. They're willing to put them out there for a couple of days, and the teachers are adamantly against it. So who wins? The teachers win, not the kids. They're interested in the kids. Spencer and I were having this discussion the other day about this, and you mentioned about the replacing the teachers, and I said, that's pretty much what I said. I said, look, they don't want to teach. Hire more teachers that do want to teach.
And cut the budget accordly. If we're not in school, there's no school maintenance costs, there's no building costs, there's none of that. So, whatever percentage of it is, and all the teachers who are not teaching for whatever reason, cut that out of the budget.
Yeah, and you can, heaven forbid, because this is a sacred cow, is cut teacher salaries for the online, because they're not also going to have all the overhead expense of getting to school and whatnot. Some of the things that one of the reasons that they get paid is to help cover their commuting expenses and all the other things that go on. But if they're at home, do you need to pay them as much? No. So
you're working about 30% as much. So you get 30% of your salary.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, all right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. It's always great to have you with us. Please, as always, stay safe, stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not forget that, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. God bless America. We will see you again next week as we get closer and closer to the election. I think next week will be at about 97 days next week by the time we meet for the election. So it's getting down there. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great day. Not only stay safe, stay cool if you're in a hot climate, because it's pretty hot and humid out here. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. We'll see you again.